Hello everyone, and welcome to this presentation for Rebellion Studios about the Sniper Elite 5 CG trailer. My name is Hugo Guerra. I was the director of this project, and I'm joined here by He Sun.
Hi everyone, my name is He Sun. I'm head of VFX at Rebellion Film Studios. I'm the visual effects supervisors on the project.
So today we're going to bring you the full behind the scenes and making of the latest trailer we created at Rebellion Studios for Sniper Elite 5. And we're going to go through every aspect of the production from a point of view of the shoot, the MoCap, the concept art, the direction, also all of the CG, all the different stages until the final delivery. But yeah, let's just get started. We'll start by having you have a few words to talk about Rebellion Studios. Let's go for it.
Rebellion Film Studio established about 2.5 years ago. We are based in South Oxfordshire. This is the site, how it looks in the front. And Rebellion Visual Effects team is actually based inside this facility, and we're providing on-set supervising as well as the post-production work. And we currently have one stage that's fully operating and that open for business for any live events or film set, as well as virtual productions and other multiple stages or spaces for motion capture need or production offices. And the future of the Rebellion Film Studio is very ambitious. We already have planning permissions to build 2 additional stages on top of it. We providing multiple different services as a VFX. We're providing virtual production services for the content to be built on the LED wall, as well as the game cinematics and trailers for other companies. But we're also providing visual effects services for film and TV. Now I'm going to play the virtual production showreel from Rebellion Film Studios that works being produced by VFX and the motion capture team in the last 2 years. This trailer you're seeing here is entirely produced inside Unreal Engine.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for that presentation about Rebellion Studios. We're now going to watch the trailer. The trailer we're going to be presenting the behind the scenes and the making of. Again, like I said, this is Sniper Elite 5. It's a video game created by Rebellion, and the CG trailer that you're about to watch was created by Rebellion Film Studios. And this game is coming in 2022. It will be available, as always, on Xbox, PlayStation, and Windows as well. So let's watch the trailer first.
The steel wheels of the Nazi war machine crush everything in their path. Fast, relentless, ruthless. They dominate and destroy, casting a vile shadow across mainland Europe. Now we must strike back, living, fighting, and killing in the shadows, where most despair when they stare into the face of impossible odds, we shall smile and see an opportunity. We know the risks. If we do not take them, no one else will. We must be ready to make that sacrifice.
So, I hope you've enjoyed that, and as always, I wanted to start this presentation by just hammering like a really important aspect of something like this. This project wouldn't have been done or created without a huge team at Rebellion, both on the film studio and also at the game studio as well. And like every project with visual effects, with heavy visual effects, it's always a big team effort. So I just wanted to shout out everyone involved on this project for their incredible contribution and their talent as well. It's not just the two of us, it's a lot of people behind the scenes to make something like this to happen. I'm going to start by talking about some of the references. As a director for this project, obviously, you always go through a phase where you just basically bringing back references and gathering things for the project. And I just want to like mention something, especially when I'm talking with students and I'm talking with other artists. There's always this idea that you're always a bit afraid of stealing something or using too many references, because obviously if you use too many references, sometimes the projects could all look always very similar to each other. I have this quote here that I usually, a lot of people know this quote, and this quote, of course, a lot of people think it was done by Pablo Picasso, although that's why I wrote maybe there. It could maybe not be him, no one is really sure. But one of the things that homes in on this quote is, good artists copy, great artists steal. I would like to say that this is not exactly how I think we should be doing a project. What I think we should be doing is good artists copy, great artists capture the essence. And that is really what references is all about, in my opinion. An essence, which is basically to capture something, but not exactly do a copy or a clone of it, but actually just having the emotional resonance of that thing that you're trying to capture. And so for me, personally, for all advice out there for everyone that is watching, both students or artists, would be just don't just copy, capture its essence. And that's exactly what we did on this project. Here's some frames of where you see side by side frames of the final version of the film and frames of the reference. We were trying to capture the essence of this magical moment in the early morning. That meant that, as always, we used a lot of references from real photography, real environments, real things in the world. As I always tell to my students, the first thing you should do whenever you're thinking of working in visual effects is to capture the world. Take photos, as many photos as you can. Get a camera, not an iPhone camera, an SLR camera, and go out and use lenses and capture your world around. Step away from your desk and see how the world behaves. And that's what we did here. We used photos of nature, photos of sunsets, photos of skies, dramatic, very dramatic low light images, and of course some films that we were inspired by to capture that blue and red environment that we were trying to capture with a lot of fog, and especially on the early stage of the trailer. A bit later, of course, we then evolved to the section where the sun is actually hitting the environment, especially this big castle, And so that's, again, that magic moment of golden light, of flaring, of like the bloom and the gloom of the sun. And especially you see here when you look at the original images that we used as references and, of course, the final images next to it. And we were really proud to try to capture this because I personally, from my point of view, sometimes I feel some certain CG projects and especially certain visual effects projects are sometimes overlid. And so the idea behind what we tried to do with this project, both us and the team, was to deliver something that was not as lit as normal and to actually work with silhouettes and work with dark moments and darker areas and a lot of silhouettes, really, not only to maintain some mystery behind this character, but also to convey a more film noir look to the whole trailer on the beginning, especially because the trailer is supposed to be set on the Second World War, which has a lot of resonance with those kind of films, especially black and white photography at the time. So these are, again, some of the references that we had. You know, there's a lot of them. Also, not only there's just the silhouettes, but also the pools of light. We've worked a lot with the lighting team and the team at Rebellion to really develop this kind of idea of shadows, especially when Carl is going into the tunnel and you see the shafts of light and then we reveal the character for the first time. Highly inspired by cinematography and by certain films as well. And highly inspired by this shot, this particular shot from Seven, from David Fincher, was a crucial shot to kind of like maintain this idea of silhouette, but also of macro photography that we also have on some shots, especially the shot with the eye, with the sniper, the enemy sniper trying to snipe Carl, and of course the enemy sniper that we see, the actual almost the gun almost comes in through the screen on a very macro level. The whole idea behind this, and Sun and we are going to talk more about this as we go through the visual effects, but the idea was to have as much groundness as possible. Everything on this trailer was meant to be done as if it was shot for real. The cameras were based on real cameras. The weight of the cameras, the lenses were based on real lenses, as you're going to see later on when we deconstruct the compositing and the grading as well. We based ourselves on imagery of using lens distortion, chromatic aberration, bloom, and all the camera moves are supposed to be fitted in reality, so they don't do crazy movements. All of them are very classically, it's shot very classical, you know, almost like if you're using like a boom or you're using like a dolly. That's the kind of thing that we were trying to get into those cameras. Now, yeah, feel free to interrupt me if you need to.
That's fine. I mean, yeah. I think we used Alexa 65 as a camera that we're trying to,
Yeah. And that was really important for us to develop not just a big sensor so that we could have a nice depth of field going on the shot, but also it gives you the opportunity to have a wider, because we use like a Panavision format almost, like it's a really wide format, you know, with the 245 aspect ratio. Obviously, on like all the projects that we usually do, and I tend to do this on all my projects, we did a lot of paintovers. And this is something that I would really advise you to all of you to always do, because this is probably the most creative moment on your project. This is the moment where you're literally just standing there with some frames from CG and you're painting on top in Photoshop. It's a really creative moment that we did with our concept artist, Jack, and we were basically just like giving the look and feel of the trailer before even production was beginning. This is really crucial for the whole team to know what we're trying to achieve. And again, this is the moment where we can invent as much as we can. We can make whatever we want because it's just a paint. It doesn't cost anything yet. There's no production involved. I really would advise you to always never underestimate the power of painting, the power of doing paintovers over frames, and so that you can come up with rim lights, you can come up with silhouettes, you can come up with the color palette of what you're going to achieve. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done as a team, because look at this, like this is the original concept art of this shot, and this is the final version. As you can see, it's so close to the concept art. Tends to be sometimes films don't really get close to the concept art, but this time we really achieved that. We really captured its essence as well. And this is throughout the whole film, all the shots kind of have that feeling that we've kind of established the language, established the composition, established the lighting, the look, the shadows already in painting. And then it was just a matter of us producing what we painted, which is the case again on this example, where you see that we got really close to not even just by the look of it, but even for the angle and the composition and the lens as well. Because even the Paintovers were done with lenses in mind. We had like frames coming out of CG for us to do the Paintovers already with the set cameras that we were working with.
We did this process almost like some of the shot, we did it twice. So at the beginning, we had a concept, and then we did previews to match the concept of framing and the lighting. And then we painted it again on top of the previous, and before we actually get the shot into production. So we really spent quite a lot of time on this process itself, just trying to nail down the creative vision.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really crucial. If you want to make something like this to work, you want to make sure you sort out everything before you go into production. Not just because of a sheer monetization point of view, because it's always cheaper for you to not change too much during production, but also it gives everyone an idea of what we're going to make. Like exactly. Both the clients, the game studio, the director, everyone knows, okay, this is what we're going for. Yeah. And having a colored version of something is always better than just having a grayscale version. It's easier for people to relate. Yeah, we got pretty close. One last one that I would like to show here is the finger, which also, again, went really close to the Paintover that Jack did. After this moment, we then jumped into the animatic. The animatic was built basically by the Paintovers from the concept art, and together with frames, specific frames that we captured from the environment. And this, of course, was already kind of getting into production because we already had some kind of layout already set, so that we could put some cameras and actually position the cameras already resembling what we had to do. And this was a crucial moment because this is the moment where we're already establishing the edit, not just for the voiceover, not just for the script, but also for the MoCap shoot, which is so important to have an actual full edit before we go to the MoCap shoot. But I'm going to shut up now because I always talk too much, and that's one of the problems that Portuguese people have. And I'm going to...
Well, you didn't have that facial expression.
Yabba, yabba, yabba. So I'm going to leave it up to Sun to continue the production of this trailer.
Yeah, so after that Paintover Boardmatic you've seen earlier, that's when we first time presented to the client, which is the game division in this case, and then they absolutely loved it. And obviously there's always notes and changes. We have to hit a certain point, and then we produced a pre-visualization based on that version, which then we took on set with us for the motion capture. Credit goes to our amazing audio motion capture facility, one of the best in the world. And then after the motion capture, we spent a lot of time. The motion capture was done within 1 day with Hugo and myself and the animation lead on the set, supervising the whole thing. And after that, we actually did a motion editing pass on top of it to clean up the finger, to clean up the penetration, the feet, and things like that. Then it passed to our final animation department for the finalizations, and then for put into the shot for the rendering. So in here, there are some example of the pre-visualization we did, and everything you saw here is just animation blocking. What this gives us is a really good, clear vision and idea what we need to do on the set with the directors, with the talents together. We actually prepped a lot of props, have the similar dimensions of the sliding when he's sliding down the roof, and how much he need to slide, how much he need to jumps. And we actually consider that a lot. And before we even go on the set, we transfer the entire set, the digital set, if you like, into the physical set. And that's the description as I would like to see. And these are some of the footages we did on the set, and then how close we get them in the final shot, which is pretty amazing. And this is our audio motion facility and how he actually climbed.
And this is one of the advantages of doing it this process, because obviously when you go to MoCap, you want to be quick and you want to like experiment as much as you want when you're with the actors there, but having a very strong edit and a very complete sense of where the cameras were going to be, what lenses we were going to use, and what angles we were going to use was pivotal for us to make this production really smooth. You know, we spent one day on audio motion, which was a fantastic day over there, but it was really, really a quite quick shoot because we knew exactly what we needed, and we ended up capturing everything, on that day, including not just Carl, but every character of the game, of the trailer, including the enemies, including the other soldiers, the Nazis. Actually, yeah. They did, we had Mike Snow, which was the stunt artist that you see here. He ended up being the one that did every character on the game. And that really was crucial because it allowed us to have a much more professional, performance from his side, instead of us having to go back and building other performances. One little shout out to Mike Snow here. He was terrific on set. He's a very, very accomplished stunt artist. He's done a lot of films and a lot of productions. You can also see him on Australian's Ninja Warrior as well. He's always on the finals. He's really good. Although when you see these footage that you're watching now, you can kind of see that he didn't even break a sweat to do our trailer.
that was like his routine. It's just like so easy for him to do some movement. Yeah.
Oh, you need us to jump? Oh, you need me to go up? Yeah. When you see this trailer, when you see this show reel and it's like he's in fire and he's jumping, it's like it's not even close.
The one thing is like he was really precise. Like, oh, we need to jump before this line here, and he would just stop there and jumps it, and you need to land on that spot.
I know,
because the CG ends there, and he's just like jumps and boom, land there, boom, boom.
It was awesome. Great. But yeah, we had a lot of fun, and we also had some props on set as well. I mean, the whole volume is really cool because you have a floor with a grid so that you know where the prop should be, and that, of course, can be measured from the CG elements as well. We also have the props, which also have tracking markers as well. Then we, build ramps exactly to the scale of the buildings and to the scale of everything that we had around us, so that it could fit into the trailer as best as we can. Here's some examples of the most complicated shots of him jumping. I'll talk more in detail about this later, this shot, and you can kind of see him going through the ramps. Again, everything measured with this grid. It's almost like we have a Maya grid on the floor. It's really a nice playground to do this, to play around with this, and always viewing it in real time on one of the screens and then seeing the other angles as well on the other screens. But yeah, we had a blast, and we had a lot of fun doing these crazy stunts with Mike on set.
Yeah, so that was the fun with animation, if you like, and the fun on the set. And then after that, we had another mission. When we started the trailer, the game division has already done some amazing work. The production was in the middle. So on the game division, we actually have a dedicated photogrammetry team that they actually went to France and captured a real location, some photos and some assets that we used in the game. So when this library of the asset already built, and it would be such a shame just to not use them at all. And one of the missions that we had is to bring some of the game assets over into the trailer, but give them a plus or use them in certain way that, to up to the visual effects standard. So this here, you see this screenshot is some of the example that's straight out from the game, which is a photogrammetry asset, and then we actually converted into the VFX pipeline. Another example here, which again, we actually used a game methodology here, which is kit-based method, which some of you using Unreal, you would know this. Like you would kit bash different module pieces together to form a terrain or form some sort of shape, if you like. And in here, we captured that methodology. We used a photogrammetry asset from the games and trying to kit bash them together to form the cliff that you can see on the right hand side there. And then there are technical aspects are very, very different between the game asset to a VFX standard asset. One of the mission is that the game asset don't use UDM workflow. They use a very different workflow in comparison. So this is what you see here is a building asset, which you saw in the trailer later. And then we have this kind of spaghetti of looking at UVs that come from the game. We develop a tool inside Houdini, which transferring that UV into a UDIM workflow which you see here in this example. But not only that, we actually be able to grouping a material into a larger categories. Because when it comes from the games and the material have different names, the artists using different naming conventions and things like that, we have to consolidate them into a larger category that fit into our USD pipeline. And so this tool, as you can see here, that we actually group the roof tile, stone wall, and concrete into a separate large categories, which then for our look dev department, we can just use the material that from our library and assign a different textures that being baked directly from the game asset as well. So one thing to mention is that the game asset textures is baked onto the multiple UDM that you saw here, which is done in the same process, really. These are some of the examples that the game asset directly baked onto the UDM workflow, converted into the Houdini USD pipeline that you see. And this is just a raw example of how it comes out from our render farm through that process. And it can be done with a singular asset like this, very simple barrel, but it can also be used for a larger environment set, which I will show you one of the example later. Except the game asset, on top of that, we had to build a lot of bespoke stuff. One of the challenges that we have to conquer is the game asset using a different methodology for the vegetations. The game asset uses a lot of card and vertex shader for the movement of the plants for optimization purposes. However, that doesn't really give that look that we wanted to, the quality that we aim for the VFX standard. We have our own, build the majority of the vegetations and plants and trees through the speed tree, and then bring that inside Houdini with our auto loading system. As the tree can be very heavy for the rendering, and the poly count is very high. And here is an example of how our USD pipeline model preparation stage or tool be able to prep 3 different level of detail automatically. This is the example of the tree. So you have a high, medium, and low resolution. And some of the more example here, there's another tree here, which has a lot of polygons. But again, we break it down into 3 different LODs. And we have actually a tool, which I'm going to show you later, that automatically loading them based on the camera distance. Some more examples of different bushes. And obviously the vines as well. One thing I want to also mention is that the reason we also do that, because all of these trees actually have a tech engine pass on it. So they're actually moving inside the trailer. If you look very carefully, they're very subtle, some of the shots, but the movement are there. And that's very important to give you the extra layer for the shot that you're looking for. So the environment build, again, here is the example of when we started the environment build, we took one of the level, which is already kind of semi-finished, if you like, through the game. When we gather in the reference, me and Hugo and our concept artist Jack together with pre-visualization artists, and we spent quite a lot of time just doing the research of, okay, how the games look like, because it's a sniper game and it's the 5th version, it's the 5th of the entire franchise, and we need to be truthful for the game. We can't just make something that's not existing. So we fly around the game. We took a lot of screenshots of how the game might look like. And then we also, because as I mentioned, we had a photogrammetry team, and they were on set and on the actual location, captured a lot of photos. And so we kind of matching the game's comparison to the actual photos that we have. And then The other thing worth mentioning is that Sniper is truthful for its accuracy of the historical evidence. So we gathered a lot of historical photos as well as how the lighting was displayed and things like that.
And this is may I add that this is actually an incredibly important thing on the entire franchise, because Sniper Elite, like Sun said, is very, very accurate. It's always been known for being one of the most accurate games of the Second World War on every aspect, not just the buildings, like Sun is saying here, but everything from the weapons, from the boots, from the clothing, the straps, even the belts. Everything is very, very historically accurate, to a point that is highly researched as well, with a lot of feedback, and also a lot of really a lot of big research from Second World War specialists as well. So we knew that we had to make this really, really right, because we knew that people that were going to watch this trailer are people that are so used to this kind of level of quality,
Absolutely, yeah. Right. So within this is the screenshot that we took from the actual games. That's what stage they are at, which is already a lot of details, as you can see, done by the amazing game division artist. So again, we use the same process that I showed you earlier, the conversion process, but this time we group them into different parts, and then convert the entire set basically into USD Pipeline inside Houdini. As you can see, obviously we lost some of the detail because not everything can be transferable. So things like a vertex paint, the material blend, the vegetation stuff, and we actually lost some of them. But this gives you a really good ballpark and to begin with, for the artist to be able to add the realism on top of what you receive, which is a huge time saver, So, and then we started the environment build, because the trailer actually, one of the things the trailer emphasizes is that the large environment, large level that a player will be able to play and interact to. So we expanded that even further in here. So it's not only in that island, but also the surrounding area that you saw here. So all the terrains that you saw are using Houdini high field that generated procedurally and as an expansion of the game player area, if you like. And then we have a scatter system that allows you to generate the vegetations on top of the high field. Again, all of this is done procedural, and even the look that you're seeing here, a lot of them are just noises, patterns, and blend on top of each other, and to give you that realism. But the reason we're going with so procedural heavy is that because it allows us to change back from the model. So let's say if you wanted to, if you're supervisor or director and asking, can we have that terrain a bit lower, but, I already generated the vegetation, that means I have to redo it. And with a procedural approach, you don't have to, because then if the terrain is lower, and when you open up with Houdini, it will automatically recrook the entire graph that you have generated, and which then all the stuff will just fall into places automatically, which is really flexible and huge time saving in a sense. When we started doing the look dev, and we knew that even this shot was only going to be done for early morning, but for the purpose of the accuracy of the material, how the material will behave with different lighting, we still looked at this under different lighting conditions just to check every material is physically accurate. And then once we know that gives a lot of freedom for the lighting department to basically lit this thing and don't have to worry about the material not behaving correctly. So everything you saw here, and including the volumetric light, are completely done in the lighting. So we actually use a lot of CG rather than a comping at the very end. We want to give the comper a good a ballpark to work with, and they can just work on the detail rather than have to worry about, can I have a generate this volumetric light or something, because we can do that in CG. And this is the DMP passes with the comp. Obviously, you can see the comp department has added some noises inside of the searchlight that give that extra realism. But also the DMP artist has done some DMP touch up on the cliff to give you that extra details and that you saw in the trailer.
The cool thing about this, before we jump into the next thing, the cool thing about what Sun is describing is that, yes, you're probably considering, well, the shot was nighttime, and why did you have to focus your attention to have this accuracy so that because you knew it was nighttime? And on an older, back in the day, that would be the choice. The choice would have been, we would just maybe done it in matte painting, or we were actually probably would have done it on just nighttime and then figure it out. But the cool thing about doing it this way is not only it allows you for changes if you need them, not that we had to change. We didn't have to change to a daytime shot, fortunately. That was not the case. But the advantage of working this way is that you can ground your shot in reality. Everything is real. It's the correct lighting, correct materials. Everything is as it should. So you start with the real, and then you work on top to make it better and to make it sometimes more stylized, sometimes less stylized, sometimes more real, sometimes less real. But you should always have a base where everything is real, and then you deconstruct from there. And then you can add some extra flourishes, like the searchlights you're mentioning there, like the way that the actual fog is behaving. All those little things could be artistic inputs that come into the shot, and they were. But starting on the most realistic round base is always the best approach that I advise everyone watching this talk to always start with, because from there it can only improve, because then you're not fighting the shot. You're not fighting with problems,
Yeah, and the other thing worth mentioning also is that some of the assets can be shared under different lighting conditions. For example, the foreground rock you saw here, you could use that in the sunset level, which you just use the same asset, because when you look there, it's physically accurate, like you were saying. Then you can just give you that freedom to use it wherever you want, really. Don't have to create a separate one, which you might end up by doing more work if you do that. So you spend a longer time to make sure it's right. It's a bit like a pre-production, you get the vision correct, and then you put it into production, rather than you don't have the vision and you just started it. And this is the same. You have a solid foundation and you just build on top of it. Sweet. So let's talk about the character. Character is always a big challenge, because when we started the project, we actually don't have a finished project character at all. This is all we have, is a spreadsheet of a description of how he looks, and we have some scans of his head and his clothes and everything. That's all we got. So one thing they wanted to improve in the game is they want even to improve the topology, the detail in the game level from the Sniper Elite 4 to 5. And in this spreadsheet, you can see on the left bottom, there are a version of topology from Sniper 4, and there's a version of a topology that Sniper 5 they're trying to achieve. So these are the scanned assets that we got from the game division. This is not a finished product. This was a whip version that we use as reference. And there's still discussion about how he should look, how the details should be improved and things like that. So, and I'm quite pleased that we actually achieved something that, very similar, but on top of what we already.
And it's worth mentioning that obviously the game was not ready by the time we were doing the trailer. And so it's worth mentioning that is why also you have to develop a pipeline like the pipeline that Sun is about to describe, because you need to make sure you are able to input any particular changes that might need coming from this model, because we know it's going to change, because the model is going to improve as we get closer to the delivery of the game and as we get closer to the deadline. So it was very important to keep the essence of Carl, but also leave things as flexible as possible in case the look of him would develop further. So this is why it's crucial to develop a pipeline, really, to do these kind of things.
Absolutely. And here is we spent quite a lot of time to analyze the topologies, especially around his eye area, because we know there's one shot when he walked through the corridor and your attention would be around his eye. And as Hugo showed you earlier in the concept and in the actual shot, that all the attention would be there, and that's how we capture his emotion, how to capture his this cool kind of sniper look, if you like. We obviously internally we have our own facial archetype, which is common topology that we able to mapping any scanned asset onto. So this will maps onto the scan asset. So that's what I mean. So every scan asset you have, you just use this to map on top, and the topology will be the same. It gives you the advantage of doing things relatively fast, because in this trailer, as we said, we have other character. We have the German troops, and we have the officers that we needed to model. And so again, we just had the scan asset from them. We just map the same topology on top of it. And then this also allowed us to create a blend shape very, very easily with the different effects types, so that we can blend between the different expressions and things, as you see here. This is the finished model. When we finish the head and all the cloth and stuff, this is how it looks before we go into the look dev department. And then we started the grooming as well as look dev at the same time. Again, this is quite different from a game approach, because the game here, as you know, is mostly done by card with textures on top. We had some shots that are super close. We just had to use more of a grooming method that VFX standard uses, which then we obviously using the Houdini 18.5 guided groom system that generated layers of different hair, which have a short, longer, and then they give you that extra look that a car need to have. And then look dev department done some fantastic work here. As you see, we gone really, really extra detail here. If you look careful on the sweater, there are actually some furs on top of that give you that actual realism, the detail that we needed. Again, I know it's like in a game, in the trailer, it's kind of dark, but this extra detail, it really adds that extra 20% that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's always better to have as much as detail as possible, because that's how real life exists, really. So yes, if you look at the final trailer, the depth of field probably will be in the way of some of the fine detail. But when you see it, and there are moments on the trailer that you actually see it, when he's loading the gun and when he's walking through the tunnel, then you see that detail. But even on the other shots, when he's far away, it just adds. Yeah, it just adds to the realism of the shot. So never underestimate the power of making the most detailed, highest resolution you can do on a project, because remember, real life doesn't have resolution. It's like it's infinite, so you need to make sure it's infinite as well from your side, as much as you can run it on a machine.
Exactly, as long as your machine handles it, then it's fine.
Yeah, when the machine is crashing, either put more RAM, or then you've reached this is going to be the maximum quality I can put on that trailer.
Yeah. Again, there's some optimization work we did, which we will show later. We'll see later, that explains how we optimize the memory and the render time.
Yeah. And don't forget that this entire thing was delivered in 4K. So this was a 4K trailer, and I really recommend you watching this in 4K on YouTube. There's a link on the description of this talk that you can watch the actual final version in 4K on Rebellion's YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm. So now we're talking about FX. FX was obviously done in the Houdini. One thing about this trailer is that we emphasizing this is early morning, and there's a lot of fog and there's a lot of mist, and we try to do this as volumetric as possible, because when you're doing a CG, it behaves much, much more accurately under the lighting. So we have a shot that truck go through, which you will later see it. There's a truck going through the fogs, and you can see the lighting lit up the fogs. And so it was important to do this in CG, but also we created this library of mist. You saw this as some of the example, which can be used in CG, but also we rendered this as just a card that passed the compositing department, and they can do the tweaks inside the nuke. And it was, so I would say it's a kind of mixed approach, between the CG as well as the 2D. Some of the shots that you saw when he running across the bridge, we had to do hero simulations here as the truck running through the fog, and we want to create that air turbulence, which is really, really nice. Here you see here the kind of the way that fog's been turbulenced by the truck movement.
And it had to be real turbulence. It couldn't really be like an element or anything like that, because it had to respond to this very, very, very tricky moment where the light of the red of the truck would lit up this entire fog.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it was a beautiful moment of both the lamps on the front, like, obfuscating the guards so that Carl could run on the back, but also this red really gave it this like red mist, which was really beautiful.
So for some of the larger kind of data work, if you like, including the ocean and cloud, we're normally starting with block out, if you like. So the metaball that you saw earlier, and we call them the layout. So we kind of lay them out into the shot, and to get the sense of how the camera speed is traveling, but also how much cloud we need to have in the shot to be able to get what we need. And then later on, we use those as an emitter to basically VDB volume the whole thing, and then they give you that kind of actual cloud looking. And then before we go into the lighting. So anyway, so the VDB volume pass that you saw here, and then we group the different lighting, rendered a separate light group that allows the comp department to put out the brightness and darkness, the bounce light, the fill light in different ways. It doesn't have to go back to the CG to re-render it. On top of that, we also generate a RGB pass, which is just different density using, and that again gives you the ability that to put different part of the micro detail that's through from the cloud. Doesn't have to go back to CG, re-render it again. Ocean was another challenge that we had to conquer, and we actually done quite a lot of oceans before this project, and each version we actually improved them on top of it. But the methodology are quite similar here. When the ocean is closer to the shoreline, we have multiple containers that to simulate the waves as then we stitch them together with ocean spectrums at the back. For the hero simulation, which you saw later, we had to generate one patch that just for the tip of the landscape to have the crushing waves a bit bigger. And then this was comped later in the compositing department to give you that extra motion. Lighting. So as we saw earlier, that when Hugo describes to you about the lighting we're trying to capture, our lighting department has to analyze that and grouping the lighting into two master lighting setup. So one is the early morning, which is this kind of cooler looking and dark, and then the other one is directional sunlight, which is a golden hour we capture. So in the lighting department, we have two setup, master setup. One is as two master scene, if you like, and then each lighter will reference these into the shot. Then they can tweak the additional lighting on a per shot basis. Some AOV examples that you saw, just typical AOV example that how we breaks out the shot for the comp department to be able to tweak them individually. Again, we generated the light group here again. So we have skylight, backlight, bridge light, ram light that allow the comp department to change the lighting brightness or put some parts out, stronger silhouette, stronger rim light to give you that control as how the final images will contribute. And the kind of a beauty RGB passes. QC render that comes through the farm. We do this quite often. Every night, our farm will pick up the shots and render through the USD pipeline. And the next day, we can check how they looks. So as I said earlier, Rebellion's visual effects film studios are fully neutralizing Houdini pipeline, and we are actually one of the very early adapter for the USD pipeline that we actually are very proud of it. So what is the advantage of the USD pipeline and why we choosing it? First of all, because we are new and we embrace the new technology, and we don't have a legacy of the technology that we need to inherit.
That's one of the advantages, isn't it? If you having like when you have I mean, both you and also me, we've worked on very, very big facilities, and that's always a very difficult thing to steer the ship, to change a pipeline. But because Sun had the opportunity to develop a new pipeline, that's when you can really shine, because you can bring in as the latest stuff that is actually existing. Yeah.
So we spent quite a few projects developing this pipeline, and it's still being developed and is continuously improved. As I'm speaking now, our pipeline is already evolved into the next version. So, but why are we choosing USD? And USD obviously is developed by Pixar, and it's been around for a few years, for many years, in fact. But the SparkFX has done some fantastic job to bring them inside Houdini as a part of their software workflow. It is famous for its non-destructive because of the nature of USD is just the individual department as its layer, and the data get overlaid or override on top of each other and on particular parts. In a way that what I'm saying is that each department doesn't have to carry the whole data chain. It will only carry its own data. For example, the transformation data can manipulate a single props if that props need to move around, and all you need is just transformation data rather than the Brexit data, if you like. So when we overlay the department layer on top of each other, you can disable certain part of the layer as like disabling the animation department if you don't want to have this character moving around, but you want to see how this character is static looking in the shot. You can disable that layer, or you can disable the lighting. It's disable a sub-layer as however you want to be able to final quality check what this shot contains all the data that you need. Some examples here that are how we typically constructing a scene. So we have animation layer, which is layered on top of the static mesh, which is a T-pose of character. And then we're layering the groom on top. And then we're layering the environment. And then the FX department finally layering their FX on top of it. And here is a great example that you see the tile that's been disturbed by Carl is only the transformation data. So it was not a vertex cache data that come from, and the effects only carries these data, which will be overlaid on top of the layout to make those tiles move. That's the advantage of it. So here is a screenshot of the typical assembly. So you have character animation, CFX, which is on top of the animation to make the cloth move, and then environment look dev on top, and then you have the camera on the right-hand side, and then you have the FX. And this collection node that you saw here, which is the which SparkFX called them collections, which is essentially a grouping. It's like you group all of this layer into the animal or whatever you want to call it. Then you can separate them in the render passes if you want to. As I said, separating them in the render passes, and here is the typical lighting render layer setup that we have. We normally separate into environment, but inside the environment, you have even more detailed splitting here. You have like foreground, background, you have the vegetation scattering, splitting it. And in the volume, you have different volume being splitted as well. And then animation, you have the character, and you might have the foreground character as well as the background character being splitted. This is what the collection will be used for in here, is you prone in different parts. For some of you knows Katana, this is quite similar to that concept, if you like, the Katana workflow. Again, but the advantages here is we're doing everything inside one software, so we don't have to jump in between. So kind of really, really great that all the department to be able to use Houdini at this point. So this is the LOD system I was talking about earlier. In here, we have this tree that you saw, the beautiful tree, the famous tree. And as the camera you put it out, and you can see is calculating the distance to the object, and is swapping the load of the tree automatically here. Again, next one, a camera frustum based, when the object is outside the camera frustum, is using the lower LOD. We could have deleted it as well. So you could have even a further optimization saying, okay, if the tree is outside the camera frustum, I'm going to delete it. The reason we are not deleting it is because in some of the shots, they contributing to the lighting. So the bounce light or the casting a shadow into the environment. So we have to keep them to be able to simulate that real environment. But they don't have to be highest loading. They can be a lower loading. That's why we're doing it. Again, if you found a one tree as too low res, you want to hire that tree, you can just easily in the USD just say, I want this tree to be using a higher res. You can just give that description to that tree. Again, it's the same universal description. It's a description. Everything is just how you describes it. That's the concept around it. And again, this is a combination of how both optimization tool works in conjunctions. You have a camera frustum plus the distance based, and here you see the change in the color based on the camera distance as well as the frustum. Now I'm going to hand over to Hugo to talk about the lenses, which is really fun.
So after all of that, obviously all of this was happening kind of all at the same time. One thing to really home in on a project like this is that all departments are kind of working throughout with a very collaborative way. And so, on the finishing side of this trailer, we had, of course, compositing and grading. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. As I mentioned on the beginning, we tried our best to make it as realistic as possible, respecting some laws of how cameras work and lenses work. And for a while now, on projects, that I've been developing this kind of methodology where if you need to do a full CG project, then for you to really make it as real as possible, the best methodology would be to kind of mimic what a camera would do. Now, obviously, those things are difficult, still currently, even to this day, on CG packages to do. So for my point of view, one of the best ways to approach this is to actually go and film for real. That's because my background is for live action, and I've been on set for so many times. I'm now used to gathering and collecting lens grids from all the shoots that I've done for supervision. And that's what we did here. We've used like a very similar sensor camera to the sensor that we were using inside our CG application. And we ended up shooting all the lenses that we were using because we've managed to do all the shots with specific lenses that would connect to specific lenses that exist in the world, in the real world. So that means using a 50mm, using a 35mm, using a 105mm, trying to keep it as grounded as possible. And shooting these grids gave us three things, among other things. It gave us the lens distortion, it gave us the chromatic aberration level, and also the vignetting of each lens, because obviously, depending on the f-stop and depending on also the lens, you might have a darker edge with vignetting or a brighter edge or more distortion or less distortion, depending on how wide the shot is or how telephoto lens the shot is. So by picking this information up using a Nuke to extract the lens distortion, this is the kind of thing that you end up having. So as you can see here, this is a frame straight out of CG. Looks beautiful. It already looks very accomplished, but we're trying to give that extra 10% of patina of realism on top. So when you start adding lens distortion, then you start bowing the lens. Obviously, it goes without saying that to do this, you need to render an overscan. You need to render extra pixels on rendering.
Yeah. We did about 30%, I think.
Exactly.
On some of the shots, yeah.
On some of the wider shots, and that is a cost that this has, of course, because for you to distort this, obviously the bowing the lens on very wide shots, you get this kind of you basically get a bunch of pixels that will come into the scene. Now, obviously, there are multiple ways of doing this. You can also apply the lens distortion directly in render time, But I would not advise that, because that will cut some of the flexibility in compositing. So it's probably better to keep it in comp, although it will require more render time on wider shots. But you can figure out how many pixels you need extra on a per shot basis if you have like a render farm budget. You know, you can always like render less on some shots, and because obviously the teleobjective lenses didn't have as much pixel distortion as a wide shot like this one. Then on top of that, the lens distortion and also the grade and the grain, which also was captured for real for us to add grain to the top of it. Those three things just add that extra realism. I've made some close-ups here. This is the full CG coming out of the render farm. This is with the lens distortion, vignetting, and chromatic aberration, and then with the grain and final grade as well. And as you can see, it just kind of... it already picks up something that looked beautiful, and it makes it even better because it gives it a bit of a sense of realism of all those little small artifacts that you would get from a real lens, you know. Here's another example, car looking magnificent. This shot is probably one of our proudest shots. It looks beautiful in terms of detail. And again, on top, the lens distortion and the grain and color correction, giving it what already looked really fantastic, even looking even better. Not only it give it the blurriness and vignetting and the emulsion that the grain gives, but also that extra factor, je ne sais quoi, that you add on top of everything. But I'm going to shut up now because I can talk about this forever, and I'm not going to do that. Let's go through some of the compositing breakdowns and wrap up this presentation. So these are some of the compositing breakdowns. I'm going to skip a few because some of them you already seen. All these breakdowns kind of start with the concept art and then kind of like go through the final stages. And we've put in the concept art here just to show you how close we got to the final product. I'm going to move on to some of the ones you haven't seen yet. So this is the main close-up shot of the building itself. And as you can see here, all the little layers that you've saw before, all the AUVs, all the light groups, all the matte painting work, all the little details of lens distortion, the grain, the spots, the breakup of the spots of the fog, all of it contributed to that final shot. So going back to saying how much of a team effort something like this is, you know. Again, same goes for this shot. These are all the different AUVs and all the different layers that we've built up from the render farm into compositing, and then building layer by layer, light group by light group, and then of course finishing off with some soft masks on grade and some extra bells and whistles that we added up on grade to try to mimic that bloom that you have from the light and from the sunset as well coming down into the shot. Again, this shot, we're really proud of it as well, this beautiful fog. It started, of course, on MoCap. We had him running, Mike running, and then, of course, the first render, all the different layers with all the different AUVs and the light groups, and then, of course, this amazing fog that then gets broken up by other elements in compositing to make it look wispy and fog-liking, because those are really tricky things to do in CG. So it's a combination of using CG fog with certain 2D pieces of fog and then multiplying them by noise patterns to try to break up the fog and make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah, this is a shot I was talking earlier.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the most beautiful shots, one of the shortest shots of the trailer, but it's really turned out really well, really beautiful. And then this shot here as well. Here's the breakdown of it, the final, the first animation pass. Then we went to MoCap and did the actual animation. Then, of course, we finessed that animation and finalized it. Then this was the first render pass of it. And then we had a breakdown, a full breakdown of all of it. This includes all the different smokes on the car, the fog, the atmospherics, the light groups, and of course all the little bells and whistles, including the sky, the moving clouds on the background, everything merged into one. So very funny about one shot though that I wanted to talk about, which is the shot of the eye with the sniper. We got this comment on Instagram about someone asking, Chris asked, I always love these breakdowns. Did you calculate the magnifying of the eye based on a real sniper rifle optics?
It's worth mentioning we do actually have a real sniper rifle at the studio.
Of course, because this game is that accurate, and you guys actually also have like actual uniforms and everything on
we do,
exactly. So it is a really interesting question of calculating the optics, but the funny thing is that we started doing that, yes, and on this shot, we actually started with this concept art, and then we've built it in CG. And this is a really good example of how you bringing all the departments together. You know, we did a beautiful eye inside this glass, all really calculated in CG, but then it was still not really working fully. So we ended up then mixing the CGI with photographies of real eyes from the compositor in this case, and actually merging both the real photo with the CG renders, and kind of like using parts of the best parts of each to build the most real piece of eye that we could make for this shot. And so again, I'm giving this example because this is a great way of showcasing how all departments come together in certain moments here to do something like this, and all ideas are thrown at it. You know, even the kitchen sink, you know, if something doesn't work, we'll just come up with another solution to merge it and get it to work. That's why I wanted to show you that shot.
Yeah.
And we have another shot like that on the trailer, which is the eye, the trigger, the hand trigger, the last shot of the trailer. I don't have a breakdown for it, but it is the same deal as well. We've also did a CG finger and then merged sections and parts and patches of a real finger photographed to kind of like augment a bit. This is almost like a bit like what we tend to do with projection systems, which happen a lot on this trailer, where we basically projected extra parts to the CG to add more elements and more details. Because once you've established the camera and established a shot that is actually kind of locked in terms of camera angle, then you can project and reproject stuff. This happened especially on the first shots. This happened a lot, where we have this big no man's land landscape, which was a beautiful CG set, but then augmented by projections and paintovers and extra stuff on top. And, you know, one last little thing just to like mention that MoCap was really pivotal on a project like this, especially for shots as difficult as this. This shot might sound simple, him jumping through the corridor and actually getting up and walking, but it's incredibly difficult to mocap something like this because you have the jump from one building to the other, then he lands by doing a roll, and then he gets up and does this beautiful walk, like the pack shot almost of him looking so cool with the gun. This entire thing was done, it had to be done in 3 sections. We had to mocap him jumping, then we had to mocap him rolling, then we had to mocap him walking on this beautiful walk that he does, the victory walk. And all of that had to be merged. And obviously we had multiple takes of every single part of this mocap to actually blend in animation. So never underestimate the... Yes, MoCap is really good to help you in animation, but there's always an enormous amount of extra animation that goes on top to merging all these different pieces of MoCap, and also to augment and make the animation even better, you know. So yes, it gives you a lot, but it doesn't give you everything, you know. But yeah, I'm going to shut up now because we're going to wrap up this presentation. It's time now. To do that, I'm going to wrap it up by doing a little bit of a shameless promotion bit for anyone that wants to follow us. Don't forget that if you want to watch more videos like this, or if you want to watch breakdowns, or if you want to watch tutorials, or even our podcast, my YouTube channel is called Hugo's Desk. You can follow at Hugo's Desk on YouTube. You also could follow me on Twitter at Hugo C. Guerra. And you can follow all the latest stuff that I've been up to and some other stuff as well, and some other crazy things I put there. You should also definitely follow He Sun on Twitter as well. He is at He Sun VFX altogether as well. And of course, goes without saying, you should definitely follow Rebellion Film Studios for all the latest visual effects they are making. They're open for business. They have an incredibly talented team there to work. And so check out their Twitter account for all the latest breakdowns and all the fabulous projects they've been doing. And one last little shoehorn. If you want to see more visual effects, you should check out my podcast. I have a podcast with Ian Fales from Before and Afters. Podcast is called VFX Notes. You can find it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can also find a video version of it on YouTube. The video version has a lot of breakdowns and a lot of behind the scenes while we're talking, completely synchronized with everything that we're making. And that is really it for us. Thank you so much for watching. Much appreciated. And thank you so much for taking the time. And please don't forget that there will be a Q&A session that you can join after. And you can ask questions as well if you want to about this project. So that is it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
I'll see you next time. Bye.
See you next time.